Welcome back to my channel. This is Wendy Renee. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. We are talking with Ken Mayo. When I tell you that this is a gentleman who opened up his heart for all of us, I am not even kidding you. He has quite an extensive resume in the Jehovah's Witness organization, 21 years in elder, pioneer for 14 years, ministerial servant for 8 years. He was the COBE, which is the coordinator of the body of elders, program overseer at the district convention. He did a lot of relief work, RBC department head, and he went to the COBE school in Paterson, New York. He also attended and gave talks at elder school. What you're about to hear may come off as a little bit shocking, and maybe it won't. Thank you for being here and welcome to the show. First, I want to say thank you for being here.
Sure, no problem. Well, let me just give a little background. I was baptized in 1981. I became an elder in 1989. So at the ripe age of 30 years old, I was an elder. And then a year later, the wife and I, we decided to go serve where the need is great. And so that brought us to Northeast Alabama, where I've been for the last 31 years. During that time, you've named it, I've done it. I've been on special committees, been on appeal committees for those that have been disfellowshipped and they think there was an error made on their behalf. I've been with the RBC, roofing overseer, been various positions within the convention and assemblies. I was actually on a convention committee, district convention committee. I was a program overseer. So I have a lot of experience. And even in matters of child abuse, I remember when I had a friend of mine, I was reading a paper from Florida, because that's where I'm originally from, is South Florida. But it had this individual that was arrested. It said Jehovah's Witness, and it had the name of the company called, I'll just say it had the name of the company in there. And I recognized the name. It was a friend of mine down there. So I called him. I said, Steve, what's this about your carpet company? You know, that some guy's been arrested. And he says, everything you read in the paper is true. He said, but I sold the company 2 years prior to this pioneer elder who just gave a talk on the convention a week ago. And yet he had been abusing a girl and he was arrested. So, but when I called another friend of mine in Florida and I said, did you read that in the paper? He goes, oh, that's just a bunch of apostate lies. And I said, well, what kind of a person would call the police, get a lawyer, or get arrested over apostate lies? I said, but I know 3 cases myself where children were involved and were molested, and yet there was no report made to the police. So you can't call an apostate lie. And then he goes, well, you know what? I just don't want to talk about it. It's discouraging. And you will find that many Jehovah's Witnesses, when you confront them with the truth, they go into a default mode. They'll say apostate lies, or they just don't want to hear it because it's not encouraging. Mm-hmm. So but the real problem exists and they don't take care of it. And that is sad. It is sad. And in fact, even with myself, I didn't mean to go down this road already. But let me just.
No, like this is completely your time.
And you know, and my wife, when we saw a program on television with Leah Remini, her awakening came a little bit later after mine. But I had to be patient with her. And I say that if you are a witness and you have woken up and your mate has not, don't just start giving them all this truth stuff. Take it in little pieces. Mm-hmm. So I was able to appeal to my wife by saying things like, has an elder ever hurt you before? And she has to admit, yeah. I said, you remember when you had breast cancer, you came home from the hospital after spending 30 days there? The elders want to meet with us to tell us that you were no longer a pioneer. I said, you pioneered for 24 years. They weren't even kind enough to wait a while, but they just sprung it right for our first meeting back to the Kingdom Hall. Wow. So I reminded her that. So the elders can be mean, can't they? Mm-hmm. And I said, at the same time, they can also misapply scriptures. Mm-hmm. For example, her sister-in-law lived with another sister, and the sister decided to move out. But when she moved out, she took all the furniture, even her own sister's furniture. And we went to the elders, and they used that phrase in Corinthians about just let yourself be wrong. Why take your brother to court? So I can see some elders applying that even to child abuse. Why take your brother to court? Why bring Jehovah's name into this? Don't do that. So yes, it does happen. And if anybody says it doesn't, come talk to me. I'll fill you in the details. But it's just sad. But I even have a girl that works with me, you know, and something happened to her. And I even forgot about the whole case altogether because she was just a young teenager when the brother decided to expose himself to her and did things. And because there was an article in the Watchtower about 2 years ago came out saying how they always use these expressions, some mistakes have been made in the past, but we're correcting it now. Mm-hmm. But she told me that during that Watchtower lesson, she cried throughout the whole lesson. And then she reminded me about it. And what was sad, because I remember I was on that case, I said to her, as a man, I'm thinking to myself, what's the big deal? As crazy as that sounds, that was going through my head. I said, he didn't touch you. So what? He exposed himself. But then I didn't think of myself as a 15-year-old girl, virgin, never seen anything like that. And then all of a sudden, bam, she's exposed to that.
Right.
So, but those are just, I could tell you a lot of cases, but I don't want to go down that road. What I thought I may do now is just read my DA letter, okay? And you might recognize some of these expressions.
Of course.
It said, "Dear brothers, in 1919, the president of the Watchtower Society made a bold prediction. Millions now live and will never die." That quotation was constantly repeated by the organization to the year 2000, when they realized that everyone in attendance at that assembly who listened to J.R. Rutherford repeat those words are now dead. That teaching has guided my life. Statements were repeatedly made at assemblies, conventions, and in print that there was no career in this system of things. So you don't need a job with benefits or retirement. Your full-time job is to preach the good news. Although many of the friends ignored or brushed aside such statements, my wife and I believed it, having a combined 38 years of regular pioneering. Our organization is against higher education, but many of the teachers in our public schools with this higher education are teaching our children. These educators have bachelor's, master's, and even doctorate degrees, and we have no problem with them teaching our children. And yet, from time to time, announcements are made that Bethel needs doctors, nurses, lawyers, and such, those with higher education. To me, this sends mixed signals to the friends. I've come to the realization that our organization is run mostly by high school graduates, needing assistance from experts, those that are highly educated in various fields, dealing with complex issues, continuing change in doctrine when the current doctrine becomes outdated. I have no axe to grind. You men, for the most part, have been kind and caring and loving to me. I am at a point in my life that I'm tired and broke, that I have whatever little time that I have left living, I need to explore other options to survive that go contrary to current Watchtower teaching. After much prayer, I've decided that I no longer view myself as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I realize there are consequences with disassociating oneself from the organization, but I believe that this is the best path for me to explore now. Sincerely, Ken Mayo. So that was my letter. And I did have a few guys that just texted me saying, sorry to hear that, or sad faces, but. And
that was it. They didn't try and rectify anything.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the girl who works for me called me up and says, hey, an elder called saying you've been disfellowshipped. I said, hey, hold on a minute. Oh. I was not disfellowshipped, because when you're disfellowshipped, Eva's action that the congregation takes upon the person that committed a serious offense.
Right.
I didn't commit no offense. I'm still married to the same woman I've been married to for 38 years. Mm-hmm. So I did have to text the elders, and I said, listen, I want to make something completely understandable to you guys, that I was not disfellowshipped. I disassociated myself. And any attempt to bring harm upon my good name in the community will be met with legal action.
Good for you.
Yeah, well, I read that on the internet too. Hit them where it hurts. Threaten them.
So take us back a little bit, Ken. Sure. You're now an elder. You're sitting on these committees for these horrific cases. Yeah. Obviously, your conscience had been bothering you. What did waking up look like? Did it start with these cases? Was it doctrinal? What was, and how long? And it's fairly recent, as you said, in pre-production. Yeah. So talk us through that a little bit.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because at the time when you're doing these committees, you're just towing the line. You say, well, here's the scripture they broke. Here, what does the slave say about this point? Okay, what do we do? Are they repentant or not? And that's what we try to determine. Mm-hmm. So, but as I have an awakening, and it started with the child abuse, first of all, especially when people would deny it. And I'm like, I've been there, so it's true. But then even doing that statement made in 1919 about millions now living will never die, that was actually in a booklet published in 1920. Well, where are you going to find that booklet? Because it's out of print. And most of the congregations have destroyed their old literature because everything is out on the internet. which has been changed, like I said.
Yeah.
But Harvard Law School has a library that they have a collection of every book that's been printed in the United States. So you can go there and you can see all the society's old publications. But in that publication, Rutherford used the word, he said, unequivocally, in 1925, all the shepherds of old will be resurrected to be kings here and princes on the earth for when Armageddon comes. So he used the word unequivocally, which means it's going to happen. And so he even built the house in San Diego called Beth Sarim. And it's in our Proclaimers book. So, and I looked that up too. They actually bought another property right next to it because, you know, there's a lot of guys that come back from the resurrection, need a big old palace to stay at. Of course. But, you know, Rutherford ended up making one of his homes where his wife stayed, and he was gone 6 months out of the year. But that's another story for another day. So, but just by using those words, and throughout the years, these bold statements that they made, right? You know, this end to be here within this 20th century. I gave talks on it. I was able to show, see, the Watchtower says this here. It's going to happen within this 20th century. So, but I'm a regular pioneer. I'm an elder. I'm the coordinator of the body of elders. So it's like drinking a juice, energy drink. All you do is think of the positives. You don't dwell on the negatives. So at the time when I'm dealing with these cases, you know, I'm towing the company line. But now that I'm having this awakening, okay, it's like that gut feeling. I can't stand this anymore. I was deleted as an elder, not for anything I did wrong. My adult son came back to live with us. That's a crazy thing. He committed fornication under my roof one time. And they felt that because I was so busy with theocratic activities, I didn't give my adult son needed attention. And I'm like, really?
Oh, it was your fault.
It's my fault. Right.
Okay.
But even the circuit overseer said, Mayo, we can fight this. He goes, I'll go to bat for you. But I was already having this awakening. So I said, you know, I don't want to be a part of a team that doesn't want me. And that was my reason for letting them go ahead and do their thing. Although I did accept being a ministerial servant for a time, but by this time I'm here listening to talk, and I hear an elder telling about how this young boy wanted to date this worldly girl. They go to a lake, and some other guys come out there and beat him up and put him back in the car and set the car on fire. And I'm in the audience and says, what about if someone just from the world is hearing this kind of talk?
Yeah.
Because the moral of his story was don't leave the truth. Because if you leave the truth, someone's going to burn you up and kill you. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
And even when they attack other churches, that was bothering me, because I know that by this time, and that's another thing, if you're going to make an exit, you need to form another group of friends. You need to find some friends. So I myself got involved with the community, the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a part of a Main Street downtown area, a group that it helps the businesses down in the downtown area. So I was already forming friendships. So to break away was not going to be difficult for me. It was a lot harder on my wife than it is for me. But that's how I did it. But here comes the other part of the awakening. I began thinking about some people that I did wrong. I went back and apologized. I had actually a fellow elder who that I didn't want on the body. And so I got the other brothers to go along with me, and we got him deleted. And the man cried. It was him protecting his son of all things, you know, get it?
Right.
And I went through the same thing. So, but I went back to him and I stuck my hand out and I said, Tom, I'm sorry. I am really sorry. I said, I treated you wrong. I said, I want to make it up to you. Can I take you and your wife out for a meal, and your son and his new wife? And so we did that. It kind of reconciled. It made it a lot better. There was another girl that her mom went crazy. She was a witness, and all of a sudden just made that decision she didn't want to be a witness no more. So she kind of left her two daughters minors out in limbo. How do they get to the meetings and stuff? Well, of course, they couldn't make it to meetings, and really nobody reached out to help them. So the oldest one, she goes and gets a job, and she gets pregnant. I'm at the grocery store, and I see her with this belly. I said, man, you're pregnant. Oh, yeah. Well, now I get back to the brothers. We got to form a committee, man. This girl, she's a baptized sister. We need to. So she didn't show up for the meeting. We gave her a second chance to show up, so we disfellowshipped her. And but I actually went back to her after I stepped down as an elder, and I apologized to her. I said, I could have been nicer about this whole thing. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. And then her younger sister was 15 at the time. She was actually kicked out of the house. Her mom took her over to her father's place. He lived in a trailer. And my wife did look for her. And we found her, but she was outside sleeping on the porch because her dad didn't want her in the house or in the trailer. And I felt bad about that. And that girl, though, she got into really serious trouble. She had to live on the streets. And what's crazy, I was at a business function with the chamber. This was just 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to say this, witnesses have their miracle stories, right? You hear these stories about miracles. And I'm not going to question that, because if it happens to you, it happens to you. So, but you think that it only happens inside the organization. I'm going to tell you, it happens outside too.
Well, if it happens outside the organization, it's demons.
They can say whatever they want, but I know
Right.
what I think.
Right.
And in my case, that 15-year-old girl, I felt bad for her. She was in and out of jail. And then I found out from her sister, the one I apologize, she's in the Summit House now. And the Summit House is a local charity that takes in battered, abused, and women with addictions. And I read about it in the paper about 3 years ago. I actually sent them some money just because I felt that the women doing it, it's a noble thing. And it's a religious indoctrination, I guess you could say. But, you got to have some kind of indoctrination to stop the wrong and to turn your life around.
Yeah.
So I'm at this business meeting of ribbon cutting, and a local celebrity radio station personality. We got to talking. We started talking about religion, and I told my story, where I was, and now with religion, I'm not against it, but I always want to feel accountable to a creator. So I still pray every day, and I read the Bible from time to time when I get a chance to. But I have checked out other churches. And so she was telling me about this one local church. I said, I've been there. I kind of liked it, a little heavy on the music, but hey, it's okay. And then I said, but she goes, do you give money to charities? I said, no. I said, I believe charity starts at home. I said, I will give local. And I told her how I gave to the Summit House. And she goes, oh, my church does that too. We sponsor. She goes, in fact, I'm sponsoring a girl who's graduating this week. I said, what's her name? And she told me the name. She says, that's the girl I've been looking for. The 15-year-old girl. 15 years later, she's 30 now. So I'm like, whoa. So she called me already just this past week. We talked a bit, and I told her I'm sorry that as a congregation we let you down, and that is sad. Churches go out and help their own members, but if you're not a solid, active, witness, you're not going to get no help.
No.
And that
may have changed. You probably changed her life that day, Ken, by doing that. And I'm sure there are so many people watching this right now who have never received that, but I'm sure there's also tons of elders who want that opportunity. And there's a lot of PMO elders as well. If I may just ask you a question,
Sure.
though, when it comes to the CSA cases, because that is something that the public, not only the public, but people who are in the organization and all of the people who are leaving the organization are extremely curious about, and you have firsthand experience in this. So what exactly goes on with regard to going to the authorities? Because there is nothing in the literature that tells them to go to the authorities, but they do say they're not going to hold it against the family if they do. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, these are the same people say that you can leave whenever you want to and normal family ties remain intact. And that's a lie, because are they going to invite you over for a meal that night, or are they going to come to your house? No.
Right.
That's just come out. The first thing you're told as an elder when any kind of a legal problem comes up, you call the branch, the legal department. So I remember calling, and you always have two elders on the phone. And each time we called, like here in Alabama, they have this thing called the ecclesiastical privilege. It's like clientele, it's that privilege. In other words, you don't have to report. If someone comes and confesses to you a sin, you don't have to report it. And so they more or less leave it up to the elders to make that decision, but they'll tell you don't have to say anything to the authorities. And now lately they've been saying, now if the parents want to, let them do it. But before, they wouldn't even tell you that. They just say you don't have to report it. And you're like, man, do I want to get involved in this legal mess?
Right.
Because then, now they're going to want to search your records and see what you put down in your notes. And so that's how the elders think about it. That's why they don't go report it. But so to change that, there has to be a group of citizens, concerned citizens, to go to their legislators and change these archaic laws in each state. I know 14 states have done that now, and that's why you hear more about it, because Florida and California and New York have done away with that. And they said, if anybody's been abused their whole lifetime, you can bring it out. But you still got 36 states that have that ecclesiastical privilege intact.
Well, and the interesting thing is they're more concerned about how the congregation looks. They're not interested in protecting the community. So sure, they would maybe just fellowship a predator, but now this person is out in the community and the authorities need to know about this. And that is also something that is not happening. And then I distinctly remember they would berate the Catholic Church for their problem. Yeah. And here they are doing the exact same thing. And when people speak on this, it's considered, like you said in the beginning of your in the beginning when you were speaking, that it's considered apostate-driven lies. Why would someone lie about this is something that they can't seem to answer. So they silence the victims, and they silence people like you who have been on the end of the horrible abuse that you suffered as an elder. And that must have been a lot for you in your mind to be internally conflicted. How do I deal with this? Because you think you're doing the right thing. You think you're helping someone. You think you're helping Jehovah's organization. And then in reality, you're not. How did you reconcile that?
At the time, you don't think about it. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing too about elders. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're in a different mindset because you are above the rest of the congregation. Now they won't tell you that, but you are. You're the leaders. But every 6 months, a circuit overseer comes, sitting with the body of elders. He pulls out the Bible. He'll go to Revelation chapter 3:1, and the angels to the, I'm not sure what it says there, but it said like the angel in the congregation of Laodicea, and he'll go, now, was there an angel in that congregation? No, but there was a body of men, elders. You elders are the angel in the congregation. You're in Jesus' right hand. He's using you. And that is continually put in these elders' brains. You're in Jesus' right hand. He's using you, men. You are the angel in the congregation. And you're like, wow, okay, I'm an angel. And that's how they do that. And those are the instructions coming down from the branch, from the Watchtower Society. So you can understand why the elders, they think that we're above the law. We don't have to do nothing. And
that's also a form of indoctrination. You indoctrinate someone to believe that about themselves. The narcissism is coming from the top, so it's going to trickle down. And also what's being trickled down is this is coming from God himself. So these men think that they're anointed or holy or appointed by Holy Spirit, which is interesting because of all the Pimo elders. If they're anointed by if they are appointed by Holy Spirit, then what of the Pimo elders then? That debunks that theory right away.
Yeah, and you think, and the pioneers though are also kind of indoctrinated that way, right? You are taking the lead in this area. You guys are the pioneers. You're out there in the forefront, right?
Yeah. I pioneered for 5 years, and I pioneered during the Pioneer Assist Others program. Right. And I remember I was assigned to these. I was 19 years old, assigned to the single mother with 4 kids who was struggling to make ends meet and barely making it to meetings. And they thought I could help her. No, I probably made her feel a lot worse than she already felt now that I'm a mom and I know how it works. Like it was just a way to make people feel terrible about the work that they were doing. So yes, it made me feel good though. Like, wow, I'm doing something right. I got a position.
And so I keep telling myself, this is an organization run by a bunch of men with high school diplomas. They're all high school graduates, and that's as far as they got. Wow. And that's why they make these mistakes. A lot of us, maybe with some higher education, you're like, I don't agree with that. It doesn't sound right. But you cannot disagree against the elders. You cannot go against them. I remember being in a car group, and this elder was going off about football, right? Because I like football. I was talking about it. And then he goes, that's a disgusting, vile game. They're like gladiators. You know what the Jeremiah book says about that? And so I looked at him and I said, so can I get this fellowship for watching a football game? And he goes, no. So when we got back to the hall, he pulled me to the side and gave me a tongue lash. And don't you ever embarrass me like that in front of all the friends. I said, but you were embarrassing me.
Wow.
But that's his thinking. Don't embarrass me like that again. And it's funny too, when you get counseled for the most silliest things. We took care of our niece for a couple of years, and she was out with the car group. She was telling about a program that we were watching on TV called Grimm. To me, it was about fairy tales, but in a modern day flavor. Mm-hmm. And she also went to see an updated version of Wizard of Oz. So these two elders wanted to talk to me about my movie and TV viewing habits. And they started going. I go, really, guys? Really? I said, I'll tell you what, before I turn on the TV again or go to a movie, I'll call you first to get your approval.
Mm-hmm. This must have been so challenging for you to have been the COBE pioneer elder. One of the questions that gets asked a lot in the EXJW community is to disfellowship versus disassociate. And you've been on the both ends of that now.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that and if you feel inclined to give an opinion on that? Because I understand that it's kangaroo court, it's playing their game. We hear all the same things, but what truly happens and what can you suggest to people who are watching this?
Well, whenever we disfellowship people, I mean, you got the goods on them. You got the confession, and really there's a process. Let's say you mess up one time. Mm-hmm. Now there's variables that go into it. Okay, did you know that you're going to go over to this guy's house? Did you know that you all were going to be alone? Okay, and you know that nobody's going to be around for several hours. So you can also say like they plan this. So if that's your mentality, plan disfellowship them, right? Wow. But I remember one time that this one sister we were talking to, it was just by chance we were out in service, me and another elder, and we noticed there was a car that was not hers because she was a single person, and so we went there, and a guy comes to the door, and she was dressed kind of scantily, and like, oh, and anyhow, so she confessed to being a fornicator, so we invited her to the meeting, but she only slept with him one time, so we're kind of leaning towards just private reproof, but then the senior member of the elder, he's going to tell us now that we've asked Jehovah to come into this. And she goes, well, there was this used car salesman that she had an affair with. And he goes, any others? He goes, well, we went to a family reunion. And I'm like, oh my God. So that, made it easy. Just put her out. Mm-hmm. But the case to whether to disfellowship or disassociate, if you can disassociate yourself, I say go that route, because you don't have you say, I remember in one of your videos, you've been before judicial committee. They get you to tears, right? You're crying. You're pouring out your heart.
I don't think I ever recovered, although I convinced myself that I did. Yes.
But and really, you don't know these men intimately. You probably never been to their homes, or and here they are asking these intimate questions of you. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a one-on-one, it's three guys, sometimes even more. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine a woman that's got to kill you. So why would you want to put yourself through that, knowing that's what they're going to do? And so, because then they say, well, we're doing this because we're trying to spiritually help you recover. And right?
I mean, well, what got me to this point was the fact that I am spiritually awake and that I am spiritually recovered. So that's what got me to this point. But yes, that's their viewpoint, is that something's wrong with me. That's why they want to meet with me, more of an investigation, most likely.
Well, in my case, I was actually trying to fade, but in a small town of 15,000, it's hard to fade.
Yeah.
And so I did have a year. It was a year we stopped going to meetings, and I've gotten so popular in the community. I'm really good friends with our local police department. In fact, I have breakfast with them every week. They wanted me to run for city council. And so I did.
Wow. Good for you.
Didn't make it. But the cat was out of the bag. And I was going to disassociate myself. But I was waiting for the right time. My mom was dying, and I didn't want to do it while she was alive.
Right.
And so a week after she passed away, I went ahead and announced I'm running for city council. And then that's when I get the phone call. Hey, we need to talk. I said, nah, there'll be a letter at the Kingdom Hall. I'll just go put it on the door.
You get to that point, right? We're like, no, we don't need to talk. And I think the fact that they obviously weaponize friends and family, I can guarantee you that a majority of the people who don't disassociate are the ones who are trying to hold on to their friends and family. Some have their businesses tied up in the organization. I know of quite a few people who have just faded, and they've talked about the challenges of fading, because it's almost like they still can't be themselves. They still have to put on this act because they're afraid of having their entire social structure stripped from them. And interestingly, if you go to the JW website, frequently asked questions, are Jehovah's Witnesses a cult? Why would that be in the frequently asked questions if it wasn't frequently asked? Nobody can answer that. You know?
Yeah, I use the term high control religion.
Oh yeah, definitely. Cult is
And,
it's the hard C. It's hard to hear.
yeah,
But yes. Yeah.
and people turn off quickly when you bring up that word.
Well,
So
because imagine black cloaks and eating a live chicken and, ceremonies and things like that. So yeah, but by definition, a cult has components that are pretty indicative that JWs are. But yes, high control religion for sure.
yeah, and like I told you earlier, that in my case, I was able to make other friendships.
Yeah.
From other friendships. I like I said, with the police, I know every one of the police officers in our town. I have the chief of police's phone number, the fire chief's phone number, all the councilmen and the mayor's phone number. So, and I see these folks frequently, and I'm able to even have social times with them. Mm-hmm. So I was able to make up whatever I lost. And even with the family, I would say that most of the family that have listened to me and agree with me. And so
that, how long have you been married?
38 years.
And all of that time was in the organization. Most of that time was in that organization.
Yeah, because see, I was baptized in 81. We got married in 83.
And what did that look like? Your waking up process, and did you do it privately? Because a lot of people waking up are deeply afraid of losing their spouses, and I was one of them, because they convince you that you now have grounds for separation due to spiritual endangerment. People don't want to lose their families. So can you speak on that, what that looked like?
Sure.
For you?
Yeah, of course, I'm more tech savvy than my wife. Mm-hmm. So actually the organization kind of leads you that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I started doing all my research, and Barbara Anderson, Lloyd Evans, Lady C and JT, they're my favorite.
They're great. Yeah.
And Mike and Kim. Mm-hmm. So anyways, those are just some of them. But my wife would catch me listening to them or watching it, and she goes, "You need to turn it off, or they're going to turn you into the elders."
Were you an elder at this time, or a pioneer?
Yeah, I was a ministerial servant at this time. Okay. I decided to be. They asked me to start serving again, and so I did. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I just want to take it slow." And it was more of an ego thing. I'll be honest with you. I really, because I was already kind of waking up then. And so, in fact, I remember in 2014, remember with the 100-year anniversary, and they had these international conventions. I went to one in Atlanta.
Yes.
And I said to another ministerial servant, I said, "So this is the first 100 years of Christ's kingdom, huh? Man, it's not going too good."
Yeah.
I said that we both started laughing. He goes, "Don't you tell the elders that." Okay. But as with my wife, it had to be slow. And like I said earlier, I had to remind her that elders have hurt her, and they do make mistakes. And I said, I made mistakes. And she knew that I apologized to all these people. I said, so there mistakes have been made. And then when we watched that A&E program about Jehovah's Witnesses and child abuse, and you had Candace Condi on there, they had, among others, and she goes, "Well, I find this hard to believe." I said, "No," I said, "I've done it. I've been there." I said, "But why would this girl go on national television, put her whole life out there?" And to me, it could be embarrassing. And she's calling the shots of the different men and the wrongs that they committed. Yes, it can happen. And it does happen. Mm-hmm. And so I said, you think about that. Elders have hurt you, and look how they've hurt these people. Mm-hmm. So that started kind of opening the door there. And then she'll say, "What else are you learning?" And I said, "Well, with blood in the first century, you had these Greeks and Romans coming in to the Christian congregation, and they had some things wrong. And so, Luke wrote the book of Acts, and he was just telling about how, quoting Paul a lot about, abstain from blood. And I said, "But did they take transfusions in the first century?" "Well, no, but some of them had it with their food, maybe in gladiatorial matches, they may drink the opponent's blood." Right. I said, but you think about it, blood is not a food. And so when it's different going into your veins than going into your stomach. And you have to have whole blood in your veins, not saline solution. Right. Because blood carries, food or all your nutrition to your vital organs, carries oxygen to your organs. You got to have blood. Mm-hmm. I said, he was not talking about blood transfusions. They didn't do it then. Mm-hmm. I said, but, medically, we've come a long way. throughout the years. And so these guys that perform blood transfusion are a lot smarter than you and me. And so when they say you need it, they're trying to save your life. And here we are, an organization all about life, except there's one issue, where you can just go ahead and die. And so that's wrong. So I would do that kind of things with my wife, just talk about anything that came up and just talk about all these crazy teachings. Okay, the overlapping generations things. Okay, that was a big kicker for me because the witnesses are always about what's in the Bible. Okay, show me a verse which uses the term overlapping generations. Because when Jesus was speaking there in Matthew 24:34, he said, this generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur. He didn't say in these overlapping generations. And what's interesting, if you just Google the word generation, you know what the definition is? 20 or 40 years, 20 to 40 years. That's it. Like if you have a daughter, yourself, and your mother, how many generations is that? Three. It's not rocket science.
Right.
And Jesus spoke to farmers and fishermen. He didn't speak to philosophers and doctors, but he spoke to the common man. So in other words, his words are going to be plain and easy to understand. It doesn't take somebody who is anointed to tell you what you read in the Bible. Right. You should be able to read it and decide for yourself. So with that in mind, if you just stick to the principles, how simple a generation is. And when Jesus gave those words, everybody knows it applied first with the nation of Israel. He said those words in 33 CE. In 70 CE, Jerusalem was destroyed. 37 years later, within that generation, plain and simple. And actually, the organization believed that because right in 1876, when Russell said in 1914, that was going to be about 38 years, according to his math, but then it didn't happen. So then they changed it. Well, it began in 1914. So by the time, 40 years goes by, here we are in the 50s, they go, wait, man, we got to change it. So now they come up with their own definition of what a generation is. They go 70 or 80 years. That's a man's lifespan. Correct. It is a man's lifespan, but that's not a generation. But that's how they defined it, right?
How they defined it.
Yeah. And then in 1995, and here I am an elder, and I'm saying, okay, new life, great. And so in 1995, they go, well, you can't, people live longer than 80 years, so you can't put an exact number on a generation. So you figure here they get to now, 2000, and then we're into the 2000s. You figure out 2010, they're like, goodness gracious, what can you think of now?
Right.
Overlapping generations, but they have their own, terminology. You know that they have their own words and redefine the word.
Language. They redefine words. Yeah, absolutely.
And
when it
so
comes to the doctrine of 1914, I find that that's very interesting because of 528. It doesn't add up mathematically. And the kicker for me was when Rolf Ferrulli debunked that, and he got disfellowshipped once he started telling the governing body, you guys, you're just off about this doctrine. And then crisis of conscience also was another defining moment for a lot of people who are leaving. Was your wife, I think because you were a trusted elder, your wife, and I'm curious about the wife only because so many people in our audiences are struggling in their own minds, wondering how to handle their spouses. So for example, if the husband wakes up first, the wife can feel spiritually abandoned because as women, we are trained that he is the head of the house. And now we don't have the head of the house. For the husband to be trapped in his mind, he feels that he can't now lead his wife because this is all they've known. This is all they have known is this religion and these roles that they were set in. And now they feel like the gloom and doom is about to happen. So, because you're taught that if one person wakes up, that you're doomed. Like every bad thing that happens is because now you've lost Holy Spirit. So granted, these are not Bible-based. They are Jehovah's Witness-based doctrines. But for the marriage to actually work, they have to strip themselves of that. It's okay to get divorced because now there's spiritual abandonment. That is something that they made up in the elders book. They made up this doctrine that anyone who doesn't believe anymore can suddenly end their marriage. And that's justified. But harboring a predator is totally okay. No big deal. We're going to not go to the government. We're not going to go to the authorities about this. They care more about what's going on in married couples' bedrooms and marriages than they actually do what's going on with children.
My advantage, because I've been on the other side as an elder, I mean, and not most men are elders, right?
Right.
And so I could see it'd be very difficult to convince your wife otherwise. But with me, I just said, prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah. And so I wasn't being mean about it.
Oh, of course.
But I've
son.
already, but I said, honey, if I'm saying anything that's wrong, prove me wrong, baby. I mean, we've been married long enough. You know, I love you. I've always to take care of you, and I have.
And you
But
have adult children?
yeah, one.
Okay. Do you have grandchildren?
No,
Okay.
no.
The only reason I'm asking is because
I got a friend. I know where you're going with this because I got a friend. He was an elder in another congregation, and we've been talking a lot. And he's got grandchildren, and his daughter, who's in, him and his wife stopped going, but his daughter, who's all in, says, "You're not going to see my grandchildren anymore until you get back to the Kingdom Hall."
Yep.
And is that where you were going?
Yes, that's exactly
And,
where I'm going.
and so he started zooming in on meetings just to have some kind of relationship with his grandchildren. But it's horrible that a person would use that. But I could see it because I've had fellow elders that did that. You know,
there needs to be some sort of a collective movement. For
yes.
example, the Reddit group has, last I checked, 63,000 people in there who are just conversing with these hidden screen names and they're incognito. And then there's all kinds of support groups where people are in hiding. And that's all fear-based, all of it. Because if you villainize the person who's questioning authority and you weaponize friends and family, you have people who are silenced. So we need more people like you who have been on that side, who understand what it's like to live in fear. To have a collective movement, I wonder what that would actually take.
And you know, in this day and age, unless you're making a 6-figure income, it's hard to get by. Say in my case, I've got 3 jobs. So I mean, I have my own business. I drive a school bus for benefits, and I've been delivering garbage trucks, you know, brand new ones. And now I got called by the Census Bureau to come do some work for them. So it's got to be someone who's determined. I guess my own little part is I can't really be an avid kid out there because I got to go with paying my bills. But at the same time, like with you, I'm right here that if I do come across people that want to really know, or it comes up in conversation, then I'll speak right up. I just tell it like it is. And so like with my wife, I just had to be a little bit at a time, be patient, love. But finally, you know, after so much, you're like, goodness gracious, I've been wasting my whole life. And that's how we both.
It feels like it's a waste. A lot of people that I've spoken with struggle with waking up. I'm in my 40s, and I know that there's so many things that people think about their missed opportunities. Sometimes we dwell on those missed opportunities, whether it be education. Some people put off having a family because they wanted to have a family in the new system, and they wake up when they're older. It's a very destructive way of thinking, and it's a business, an organization disguised as a religion. So if you hold people's salvation hostage, people will do anything because people want to live. We inherently want to live. So my question for you with regard to going back a little bit, if I may, whatever happened to those victims of the cases that you were on? Was there any recourse for them? Did anything ever happen to the predators? Whatever happened?
Well, nothing happened to the predators. One we disfellowshipped, and the others were reproved. So I would.
So they were found repentant.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one about the teenage girl I talked about earlier, it was actually a married man who did that to her, who was twice her age. So her marriage did not last. It only lasted 6 months, and she's got a kid with it. And I wonder, the mistakes made at that hearing could have messed her up because she probably needed counseling. Just to be, and so yeah, and the other girl I know had a kid out of wedlock, married a couple times. She seems settled now, but those are the repercussions. I can't vouch for the others because I've been away, and a lot of them have moved away. In a small town, you know, when you're young, you want to get out of the small town and go to the bigger city.
Yeah, I'm from a small town.
But the ones that I do know, it hasn't been good. But again, organization run by a bunch of high school graduates, and so they're really into what they do. You got the elders that are told they're angels in the congregation, so they have this aurora around them, and it affects their mentality and their thought process. How could this happen? You know, it didn't happen. It's a mistake, you know. So it's just the way it is. And everybody wants to talk about the positives, and that's fine and dandy, but you need to correct the wrongs.
Well, there is such a thing as toxic positivity. If they view the organization or congregation as family, you and I, we both have families of our own. We talk about the hard stuff to grow as a family. That's what
right.
you do. And if you want to run it as a business, you talk about the hard stuff as a business so you can grow as a business. You don't ignore it. Toxic positivity is exactly that. We don't talk about the real stuff because that's considered negative. No, the negative stuff is real. There's a very big difference there. And as a COBE, what was that like for you when you would get word of publishers who are doubting or doing research? What was that like for you?
You need to show them love and attention. And hey,
love bomb them back in.
Them, exactly. That'll bring them back in. Let them know that they need. And there are I don't know about a lot, but there's a good number that are staying in just for that one reason. They've invested so much in there. And I know some single parents that the only reason, or female, that they're staying in, because I've talked to them, is because that they need help from the parents and the grandparents, you could say. So even knowing it, I even asked this one person, what's going on Kingdom Hall? I don't know. I don't really listen. I just there because my parents are there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that, and that's the case, and the numbers definitely aren't accurate because of the amount of PMOs that are actually there. Even reporting service time to me seemed unscriptural. It didn't make any sense. Why are people reporting the amount of hours? Jesus clearly said it was not by works. This is a by works organization, clearly.
Yeah. I know a girl right now. She was gone for 20 years. She's like 38 now. And she started going back on the Zoom meetings. And I said, you know, this is all a joke. Why are you going? And she goes, I need help raising my kid. This is the only way I'll get help. And it's crazy that parents would just turn off their kids on the flip of a dime because of what these 3 high school graduate men did on a committee and said, yeah, you're not worthy.
But years ago, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s in the organization, baptized in 1990. And you didn't know who the governing body was. You didn't,
right.
They weren't as seen. You thought that it was like some Wizard of Oz type of situation where it's like, oh, nobody questions the great, powerful Oz. Nobody know how. So I remember when they started coming out publicly, I was like, oh, what is happening here? Because your imagination, this is where the kicker is, because your imagination of what the Holy Spirit is and leadership is, you literally envision what they give you in the Revelation book. You envision God at the top, he's hanging out at Bethel, and then they come out with, which wasn't a good idea, they come out with the changes more and more frequently when they changed the songbook. Songs and music are one of the most crucial ways to indoctrinate people. I mean, I could sing the Brown songbook from memory, and then they changed that, and now I'm not attached to the music anymore. So that was a way that people started waking up as well.
Yeah, I've been to Patterson. I got to stay there for a week for more education.
Wow.
and
did you do elder school? Did you?
Yeah, so it was. They started with the coordinators first. So in 2009 is when I was there. And I would tell you, it was kind of neat just being there. And we got to meet some of the governing body. But even when I look back on that, I don't know how to explain it other than it was just a rehash of what you've already been taught. And again, I think they did it to impress you, right, with the buildings and how everything works and how it's also structured. But as for the classroom instruction, it's nothing more than what you get at the Kingdom Hall. I will tell you that, except it's more geared towards the angels in the congregation. I have to go back to that phrase.
Geared toward the ego is what it is.
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly what it is. And you think about that. That's why these elders, they speak with such conviction because they're being told in the ear, you guys are the leaders of the congregation. You men are in Jesus' right hand. You're the angel in the congregation. You've got your spirit directed by Jehovah himself, and you get told this over and over and over again. You begin to believe it. And so, yeah, that's the mindset of an elder, plain and simple.
Wow.
And see, what was hard for me when I realized that I wasted a lot of these years, my vital energies, now I'm at the tail end of my life, right? And I'm like, what's next? That is the most scary thing for me because I never want to die. I told I would never die. I want to live. I love living. I love meeting people. I love going outdoors and doing activities. But I've got an expiration date now. And so what happens at that point? Right? Well, I don't know what to believe. Is there a little new heavens and a little new earth? Or what? Or do we become a spirit and then go to heaven? And what do we do up there? I don't know. Or I even told one former elder too, I said, I wonder if there is a new earth and we just go from one location to the other where it's all good. And that's where God's kingdom's at. Yeah. But that's the fear of the unknown is probably the hardest thing. I cried for days and days and days thinking I'm going to die. And when I even tell worldly people about it, they don't understand that concept because they're at peace with, going to heaven. And then I began thinking, if you just read the Bible without any of these blinders on and no preconceived ideas, what are you going to get out of it? Read Romans chapter 8, where it talks about being God's children. Is he talking to me? Am I God's children too? Does my witness bear witness with his spirit that we are God's children? So there's that struggle going on. And maybe I need to become just like the other churches and just accept, well, I'm going to go to heaven and yippee-ki-yay. Let's just wait till we get there. And so I try not to think about it. And I just hope, I also kid with people. I said, there's a scripture, 2 Corinthians 5:10. It says that you're going to be judged now for the good and bad you do in the flesh. And so when I do these charities, like last weekend, I helped build 75 beds for kids with no beds in our community. And I do a lot of that. But I just told me, said, well, that scripture there tells me that we're going to be judged for good and bad. I'm going to try to do as much good as I can.
Well, so, I think of things like this. When Jesus was dying, he had a criminal next to him. And all the criminal said was, will I be with you? And Jesus said to him, you'll be with me in paradise. So Jesus didn't say, well, I don't know. We have to meet. We got to talk about this. I'm going to have to talk to all of your other criminal friends and get the actual story. You got to get your time in here. We're going to have to calculate. It was not like that at all. And the reason why Jesus did that was that everything he said he did was an example for people to follow. So Name one person. I just did a TikTok on this. Name one person Jesus shunned. Name one.
Nobody.
He didn't even shun Satan. In fact, he stood up to Satan. He didn't actually shun him. And so when the organization says, they're actually, by their own words, they're putting their governing body in the place of Jesus. Because I recently just had this realization. I don't know if I'm sure you remember, you were an elder at the time when they revamped the baptism questions. So when I was baptized in 1990, I was dedicating myself to what I thought was Jehovah, and that was it. And his spirit-directed organization. And then they came out with, this is what I wanted to ask you. They came out in 2017 saying neither inspired nor infallible. And I'm not sure what it was like for the elders in the congregations to read that, but it was buried in like some obscure paragraph 12 where people are kind of taking a snooze at that point. Can you speak to that at all when that came out?
I would say this. Remember how you said how they viewed the governing body before, like the giant wizard on the big stage, and now they're seeing them as humans. So maybe they're going back to that, view them as your brother. They are the anointed. They are going to go to heaven, but they're still they're your dad, your granddad in the flesh. And I guess, well, there's a picture of Toni Morris in the liquor store behind the case. And so I guess they just say you might see even a governing body member make a mistake, but he's just human. That's your dad. That's your granddad. And so that's how I kind of take that. But but I even had a fellow elder said to me, he says, he was talking about the governing body. He said, we said that they can make mistakes. He said, but yet when they walk in the room, we all fall to our knees, the governing body.
Well, listen, I get that people can make mistakes, even leadership. We're walking proof of that. But 8 million people's lives hang on the mistakes of these people. And I've said in a couple of my videos that sure, I make mistakes as a mom and as a wife, but I have 3 people that I owe an explanation to. And we own our mistakes as imperfect humans to our families. So interestingly, that doesn't happen at all. They just call their mistakes new light. So what that does is that perpetuates God is on this organization. No. It was a mistake. They're wrong. The end of the story.
My take on that scripture about the path of the righteous ones, like a bright light getting brighter and brighter. That's Proverbs 4:18. That was Solomon speaking. And when I reread that, I go, he's just talking about as you get older, you start figuring things out. Because that's a misapplied scripture. They apply it to changing doctrine. I mean, either it's right or it's wrong.
Right.
And look at all of us that made, like in my case, I based my whole theocratic career on what came out of the organization. And you know what? My wife and I didn't ever have biological kids because there was a time when the organization looked down on childbearing, right? If you were having children, that's less time you can devote to Jehovah.
That's right.
Those statements were made. I remember it was made at a convention back in '89, and there was a sister that was pregnant, and she just started crying. And I bet you it was probably either a single brother or a brother that was not married that gave that talk. And in fact, I was on the committee that actually picked speakers. And so when you pick a speaker for the convention, it just depends on what the talk is who you assign to do that talk. So if you're talking about love and marriage, you can make sure you're going to pick a married man who has a solid marriage. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I weren't going to have any kids, but throughout the years, like my brother died back in '96. And so, we took in his son. That was his dying wish that we'd raise his son. That's how that happened. Wow. And so throughout the years, different scenarios like that have happened when we've taken care of other people's kids. But we never had any biologically because we didn't plan to for that reason, because we wanted to do all we could to serve Jehovah. So, but my beef is that when they do change doctrine and light and people have made decisions based on that old light, there's never an apology. You're supposed to feel good about the new light, but there's never an apology.
Here's the thing about the new light. For example, I was raised on the 1914 doctrine, and now that's just kind of like an urban legend. A lot of people don't actually know about 1914. So that means if what they're teaching now is new light, what I grew up on was old light, does that mean I grew up on a lie? Does that mean I grew up on what was wrong? Because here's the thing. The Bible clearly says, do not rely on your own understanding. The Bible clearly says he who is trusting in his heart is stupid. We've heard these scriptures twisted so many times. Yeah. So if the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible, whose understanding are they relying on?
Their own.
Their own, which means we are relying on their own understanding, which means we are not abiding by what the Bible tells us about that.
And you have to remember that these guys are like career men that have been in the organization for many, many years. So they lead a sheltered life. Yes. They don't have to work full-time jobs. They don't have to worry about paying the bills.
Yes.
You got medical facilities there to take care of you. You don't have to worry about insurance.
Jeffrey Jackson giving a recent broadcast. You can go to Lloyd's channel and look at that. Jeffrey Jackson talking about marriage and giving advice to parents. And I'm sorry, how many kids do you have, Jackson? How many? What are you talking about here? Like, you're the one, he's the one who literally said at the ARC, it would be presumptuous of us to think that we're God's only channel. Like, he literally lied to the Australian Royal Commission when he said that. And but anybody who's fully in doesn't actually pay attention to that.
But think about this too. The thinking of the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? We're told that any non-witness is a worldly person. Worldly people are going to die at Armageddon. So that thinking permeates that the whole congregation and the Worldwide Association of Jehovah's Witnesses. You have a disdain look at non-witnesses, plain and simple. That's why they don't go out with them. They don't play their games. Yes. They don't join the organizations, because these are worldly people under Satan's control that are going to die.
Yes.
And so
to look down on them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine him having to go before a court. And at least I'm sure he had legal advice. What happens if they ask you this question? Here's how are you going to respond? Well, you have to be presumptuous on us. But you guys have been presumptuous. You have said this is God's spirit-directed organization. In your talks, you say this is the only organization that is dispensing spiritual truth. So, yes. and they're telling that.
Yep.
And so, that mindset that they have, it's unbelievable.
And speaking back to what you said about how leaving can affect someone psychologically, because now what, right?
Right.
Would you agree that there is peace in not having the answers? Would you agree that there is, when people ask me questions about the Bible now, I love not knowing. I love saying, you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that. I think We had
Yeah.
the questions before we had the answers before the questions. And
Yeah.
what is your opinion on that?
And that's a lot of the truth. You say peace. Now, the peace I like is that I don't have to get up really early at Saturday morning to do a 7 o'clock witnessing like I used to, because I was a pioneer.
Yes.
And even on Sundays, I like sleeping in, but there's a lot of peace there, and going places, and you may want to go see an R-rated movie, right? And I said, but I'm not going there for the sex and the violence, but they had a really good storyline,
right?
But I don't have to feel like somebody's over my shoulder and get counsel about it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of piece is what I enjoy. As for reading the Bible, yeah, I do. People ask me, I say I don't really know, or it appears like this is what it says. Just like that one in Romans, it says it appears like he's talking to everybody. Mm-hmm. They were all born of God's Spirit. Mm-hmm. And then it makes me wonder, should I be doing my own little memorial every year, or I don't know. But I'm in no hurry. I'll tell you that.
If you could give advice to any PMO elders watching this, because they are.
I've said enough.
You've really said enough, that's for sure.
I mean, I'm sorry, man. I feel for you if you're physically and mentally out, because it is a real struggle. Like toward the last couple of years, I'd hear them give talks from the platform. I heard one guy, he made fun of the Baptist church. It's funny, I guess, if you're in a group of witnesses, but he kept calling them Baptist. He said it from the platform. And I'm going, but this is the Sunday public talk. I'm like, boy, wow. If I was a Baptist just coming in and check the meeting, you're insulting me. Yeah, and there's that culture there, right? They insult other churches. Exactly. They make fun of their doctrines. And like you said earlier about the clergy abuse, boy, we were all over that. Say, see them, but not Jehovah's Clean Organization. That doesn't happen here. Right. And yes, it does happen. It does happen.
There's a recent Watchtower, probably within the last decade or so, that it was titled, it literally said that because it was talking about shunning and how people leave their religion to come into Jehovah's Witnesses. And the wording, I'm going to post it here. The wording literally says that nobody should have to choose between their family and their religion. Nobody should have to do that. And here they are making people choose to stay in a religion that they no longer believe so as to keep their family. It's really sad.
And that's the hard part when I go to the grocery store and I see somebody that I've known for 30 years who's an elder, my buddy, and just look the other way. Because I say, hey, Terry, how you doing? Hey, Cindy.
You know what? And it's funny because I don't play their games either. I will never ignore someone that I know ever, outside of being introverted and kind of wanting to hermit a little bit. I would never participate in shunning. If they want to shun me and ignore me, completely fine. But I've already been down that road.
I will say, though, there's been some older sisters that I've said hi to and would actually, say hi back. And one that I said hi to, she just walked right by me, and then she stopped and came back and says, hey, Ken, you said hi to me, didn't you? I said, I did. She goes, hi, how you doing? I'm sorry that I was thinking of something else. I said, well, I do that a lot too.
Well, Ken, is there anything else that you care to share? Anything that you want to say?
No, I just, I've done a lot for the organization and with the quick builds and relief work. I mean, for 10 years there in the early 2000s, there was a lot. And I spearheaded a lot of getting groups together. And that's one bonus that I've carried with me to the other side, is that when I did this Touch a Truck event, I was able to go to the school. And here in Alabama, in Fort Payne, we have 2 electric school buses, the only 2 in the whole state. But I was able to drive one to the farmer's market. And we had a police car there, fire truck, a brand new garbage truck, and an ambulance. But I was able to get volunteers to help me to do like security. And we got the word out, had a tremendous event turnout. And so doing that, I've been able to organize several events. I even did a Latino festival because we got a 30% Hispanic population. We had about 500 people turn out for that. Mm-hmm. But just being able to get people to come and help out for free, be volunteers, is something that is a good takeaway from the religion. Help me in that area and to be prepared. Mm-hmm. But I've always done a lot for people. And even when I've hurt people's feelings and now that I'm on the other side, I apologize. And I'll be the first one to apologize. And I do have regrets, especially with the children. I hate that, when young ones do wrong and you come down on them with the hammer. And can you imagine disfellowshipping a teenager that still lives at home?
I lived it. Yes, okay. They still do it. Yeah.
It is, and you know, as a young person, we all go through those hormonal changes, and your thinking's not always right.
Mhm.
And even today, the pressures because of all the media out there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, children are still children.
And my mother kicked my brother out. 25 years later, she still refuses to talk to him all these years later. And he's married, has kids that she'll never know. And he just decided he didn't believe it anymore. He smoked a joint with some friends, and that was the end of his life as he knew it. He had he did not have his family, and we were all very indoctrinated.
Now, I will tell you, that's one thing that has changed my life is my family. Even though it's getting shorter now, I have 5 cousins that are still alive, but I cut them all off when I became a witness. I had nothing to do with any of them. So after my awakening up, I started calling them, and I've got 3 cousins now that I'm really tight with. That's pretty awesome. Gone down, visit, eat with them, talk to them on a weekly basis. And so I've been able to reconnect. I have a high school buddy of mine that who lives in Tampa. And so about 3 years ago, I called him up. I found him on Facebook, got his phone number, and we talked, but it was like we never missed a beat, even though we went almost over 40 years without talking. And the thing is, I remember when I was studying the Bible, I said, because I smoked pot and all that other stuff. So at least I've seen everything out there in the world. But I told him, I said, I can't hang with you no more, man. I said, I'm changing my life. And he said to me, he goes, well, good for you. I wish you well. I'll still be your friend. When that day comes that you need to talk to me, I'll be there for you. And I mean, we're like 21 at the time. So I lost contact with him. But then 3 years ago, I called him up, said, hey, I have a change of thinking now. I said, I no longer believe that Jehovah's Witnesses have the truth. I said, I'm doing my own life. I'm living my life now, making my own decisions without somebody telling me what I should and could and not do and do. And so, but anyway, I got to meet with Joe, got to stay overnight at his house for a couple of days. And so he's coming up here next month, probably hang out with us, him and his wife. So, it's cool just to reconnect with somebody that you had a childhood with. Yeah.
And would you agree that once you leave, you're able to see people as people,
right?
Able to not see them as, oh, you know what? I know more than they do. I'm better than them, because they teach that us versus them mentality. You've reconnected with a friend after all these years, and you're able to actually see him as a human being and not someone who just doesn't believe what you believe. Therefore, there's a division.
Yeah, and I got a beard going,
I see that. That's the first thing a lot of men do when they leave the organization. They grow that beard.
I like keeping it around this length, but I never had one before for the whole 40 years I was a witness. And so, that's kind of cool. People see the difference now. They like the new Ken, and because you're more relaxed. It's like no holds barred. What do you want to talk about?
All the relief you must have from all those older responsibilities, which is really glorified volunteer work, is really all you're doing. You're basically accompaniment, is what you are.
Yeah, and you allow yourself to be abused because you're always using your car out in service.
Oh, I remember those days. Yes.
And half the meetings that the elders have could be avoided. I mean, it's just crazy, these long meetings, because then you get back there and you start. First, sometimes you just talk about things going on without even had nothing to do with the congregation. And while your families are either waiting on you, you're going to be coming home late. But that I don't miss either. And I always tell people, I said, the witnesses are good people. They really are. They'll be honest and they're good. But it comes with a certain, strings attached. So they'll talk to you for a bit. But if you're not going to come their way, go to the Kingdom Hall or attend meetings, it's over. They're not
good people that are just misled.
Yeah.
Very misled.
And so I enjoy that freedom that I can just hang out with people and I don't even have to count how many beers I've had.
You don't have to count how many hours you were talking to them either.
Yeah, that's right. Oh boy. But I've had a lot of Bible studies though. And I got one Bible study. He got baptized and he called me up and he's one of those PMOs and it's killing him. And his wife, I said, man, you're coming on too strong. Slow down.
You brought him in and he's a PMO now?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And his brother.
Wow.
And so I'll get to talk to some either inactive publisher, whatever you call them now, inactive people, and some that have even been disfellowship. been, in contact with. So that's good too, that I have, because I was so much out there. Now that those that are out that have left the organization, I am able to meet up with them and talk to them and form friendships with. So that's kind of
the same thing. The people that I shunned I was one of those self-righteous pioneers, big time. Anybody who knew me will tell you that. Big time. I was the one that wanted to be.
You're not alone.
I wanted to be picked for parts on the assembly, and that was very much my bag. And I have since reconnected with so many people who have seen me on YouTube, and they're kind of actually a couple of them are surprised, because this is, if you would have known me when I was in, this is not something you would ever predict. But I do not like injustice, and I will continue to speak on about injustice.
Yeah, as a pioneer elder, I got to go to Pioneer School twice.
Twice. Oh, yeah. I did it once.
And as an elder, you're the one that gets to work with the circuit overseer, right? He puts you in. I was the guy. What is so funny though is that when you meet other publishers, when they see a guy like me that left, they are shocked, right?
It is a big deal, Ken. It is.
They're shocked, but I say, hey, but look at it this way: you can approach me now. I'm approachable because I got no axe to grind and I have no authority, and that's surprising too, because I still get people will call me and just say, hey, what do you think about this? And I even knew somebody that was going before judicial committee. Can you give me any hints on how to say the elder? And I said, well, be very contrite. You're really, really sorry for what you have done. You're really, really sorry how you've hurt the congregation, and you let Jehovah down. It sounds bad, but I prepped them. Yeah, and it works.
You have to. You have to play the game.
Yeah, you got off track, and then they're going to ask you, so what can you do better? I need to go to all the meetings. I need to study all the publications and practice what I'm learning.
Yeah, you got to do the fake research, or either regurgitated material that's actually not research.
Yeah, so I can be a danger too.
Ken, it is such an honor to be able to participate in your story and helping you get it out there.
Yeah, anytime you feel the need, you want to call me again. If you have some follow-up questions you'd like to ask, I really got nothing to hide.
For the viewers out there, if they're struggling with something similar and they would need your
they can look me up on Facebook, and you can send me a private message that way. I don't even mind giving out my cell number. Can I do that?
I could put that in the description box in the YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, my cell number is 256-996-2561. Text me first and tell me who you are, because if I don't get a phone number I don't recognize, I usually don't answer.
So you're out here helping all these people wake up and get an insider viewpoint. And for that, I know I'm honored to have you on this channel.
Thank you.
Speak out about the things that everyone kind of already knew were true, but it helps to have people from the inside speak about this. Ken, thank you so much for being on our channel, and we're definitely going to have you back again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching the show. If you want to be a guest on my show and be able to come out and tell your story, I would be honored to help you do that. Please email me, wendyrenee@gmail.com. Or I posted a link in the description box for you to just simply schedule it. All of Ken's information is also in the description box. And this is how we're going to do this, everyone. We are going to band together and we are going to make a movement. We're going to do what we can to help people heal. And there is healing in telling our stories. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.